Wednesday night, late October, 1973. Marfa, Texas. U.S. Highway 90, 18 miles east of town, 11:45 at night. The tour bus sits on the shoulder of the road with its hazard lights blinking, the only light visible in any direction except the stars, which in the Chihuahuan Desert at nearly 4,000 feet of elevation on a moonless October night are not a metaphor, but a physical fact. A ceiling of light so complete that the 6 people standing outside the bus in the cold desert air look up at it without saying anything, because there is nothing to say about it. The bus has a broken alternator. The driver, a man named Dennis, who has been driving tour buses in Texas for 11 years and who has seen most categories of breakdown the state's highways can produce, has already made the assessment and delivered it. They are not going anywhere tonight. A tow truck has been called from Marfa. The tow truck will arrive in approximately 45 minutes. It will take the bus to a garage on the east end of Highland Avenue. The garage will not be able to repair the alternator until morning because the part is not in stock and will need to be brought from Alpine, which is 26 miles north. And Alpine does not have a parts delivery service that operates at midnight. They are in Marfa for the night. Cash has a show in El Paso tomorrow evening, 160 miles west on the same highway. The show is not in question. Dennis will get the bus running, or Cash will rent a car in the morning, or something else will be arranged by the people whose job it is to arrange things, and the show in El Paso will happen the way shows happen, when you have been touring for 2 decades and have encountered most categories of logistical difficulty the road can produce. Tonight, however, is tonight. Cash looks up at the stars for a moment. Then he looks west, toward Marfa, which is not visible from where they are standing, but which he knows is there, 18 miles of flat desert highway away, because he has driven through Marfa before on other tours, and has the specific knowledge of West Texas geography that belongs to a man who has crossed this particular desert more times than he can accurately count. He says to Dennis, "Is there anywhere open in Marfa at this hour?" Dennis says, "The Padres." Cash says, "What is the Padres?" Dennis says, "Bar on Highland Avenue. Been there since before I was born. Open till 2. Cash picks up his guitar case from the luggage bay of the bus. He starts walking west on Highway 90. Here's the story. Marfa, Texas has a population of approximately 2,000 people in 1973. It sits on the high desert plateau of the Trans-Pecos, surrounded by the Davis Mountains to the north and the Chinati Mountains to the south. A cattle and ranching town that has been exactly what it is for the better part of a century, and that has not yet become what it will eventually become, which is a destination for contemporary art and people from large cities who want to spend a weekend in a place that feels like the American West still means something. In 1973, it is still simply a ranching town. The people who live there wear cowboy hats because the sun in that part of Texas makes cowboy hats practical rather than decorative, have worn them since childhood, will wear them the rest of their lives, and do not particularly think about it. The cattle still graze on the grasslands outside town. The feed store on San Antonio Street still has boots and spurs in the window alongside the feed. The Padres on Highland Avenue has been serving beer and whiskey to ranchers and ranch hands and the occasional truck driver and state trooper since 1931. It is not a large bar. 8 stools at the counter, 4 tables, a jukebox in the corner that has been there since 1959 and that still works because the man who owns it, a 71-year-old former ranch foreman named Eulalio Vasquez, who goes by Lou, maintains it himself with a commitment that his regulars find faintly excessive and that Lou finds simply necessary, because a jukebox that does not work is just furniture, and furniture is not what a bar needs. On the jukebox, among others, is Folsom Prison Blues. It is 11:45 on a Wednesday night, and the Padres has 4 customers. Lou behind the bar, 2 ranch hands from the Cibolo Creek outfit, brothers named Walt and Eddie Reyes, who have been coming in on Wednesday nights since they started working at Cibolo 3 years ago, because Wednesday is their day off, and the Padres is where you go on your day off if you live in Marfa in 1973. and a woman named Rosa Delgado, who is 63 years old, and who has lived in Marfa her entire life, and who comes in on Wednesday nights because her husband Manuel died 2 years ago. And Wednesday nights were the nights they used to come in together, and she has not been able to find a reason to change the habit. The door opens. A tall man in dark clothes comes in carrying a guitar case. He is walking the specific walk of someone who has been moving in cold air and is adjusting to a warmer room, a slight shift in posture, eyes taking in the space. He sets the guitar case down near the door and goes to the bar and sits on a stool at the far end and says to Lou, "Whatever you have that's cold." Lou sets a beer in front of him. Nobody in the bar recognizes him yet. Cash drinks his beer. He looks at the jukebox. He looks at the 4 stools between him and the nearest other person, which is Rosa Delgado, who is looking at her drink with the specific inward attention of a woman who is in her usual place, but is aware that the usual place is different now. Cash says, to nobody in particular because there are only 4 people in the room, and saying something to nobody in particular includes all of them. "What's good on the jukebox?" Lou says, without looking up from the glass he is drying. B7. Cash gets off his stool. He goes to the jukebox. He finds B7. Folsom Prison Blues. He puts in a quarter. He goes back to his stool. The opening guitar comes out of the jukebox speaker with the specific audio quality of a jukebox that was manufactured in 1959 and that has been maintained by a 71-year-old former ranch foreman for 14 years, which is to say, it sounds slightly compressed and the low end is not entirely accurate, but the song is completely recognizable and the voice coming out of it is unmistakably the voice coming out of it. Walt Reyes, the older of the 2 ranch hand brothers, looks at the jukebox. He looks at the tall man in dark clothes sitting at the far end of the bar. He looks at the jukebox again. He says, "Hey." Cash turns on his stool. Walt says, "Is that you?" Cash says, "Most of the time." Walt stares at him. He says, "You're Johnny Cash." Cash says, "Yes." The bar is quiet for a moment, the specific quiet of 4 people in a small room processing the same unexpected information. Lou sets down the glass he is drying. He picks it up again. He sets it down again. He says, "What are you doing in Marfa?" Cash says, "My bus broke down 18 miles east. I walked in." Lou says, "You walked 18 miles?" Cash says, "The tow truck's coming. I needed somewhere warm." Rosa Delgado, who has not said anything since Cash came in, says, without looking up from her drink, "You picked the right place. Where are you watching from? Drop your state or country in the comments. I want to know how far this story reaches." Eddie Reyes, the younger brother, pulls his hat off his head and sets it on the bar in front of him, which is the specific gesture of a man who has decided a situation is formal enough to warrant the removal of his hat. He says, "Mr. Cash, can I buy you a drink?" Cash says, "You can, if you let me play something." He goes to the door and picks up his guitar case. He opens it on one of the 4 tables and takes the guitar out and pulls up a stool and sits with his back to the corner, the way men in westerns sit in saloons, which is also the way men who have spent decades in bars actually sit when given the choice, because it is simply the sensible position. He tunes. The jukebox has finished its song and the bar is quiet except for the tuning, which in the small room sounds like a preparation rather than a performance. Lou says, "What do you want to drink?" Cash says, "Coca-Cola if you have it." Lou has it. He puts it on the bar closest to Cash's stool. Cash plays. He does not announce what he is going to play. He does not say anything at all. He simply begins, and what he begins with is not one of the famous songs, but something older. A Carter family song that June had taught him years earlier, a song that came from the same roots as everything he had ever done, the song underneath all the other songs. And in the small bar in Marfa with the 4 customers and the 1959 jukebox and the November desert outside the windows, it sounds like exactly what it is, which is a man in a room playing music because the music is available and the room needs it. Walt and Eddie Reyes are both sitting with their hats in their hands, which is a posture neither of them is fully aware of having adopted. Rosa Delgado has turned on her stool so she is facing Cash rather than the bar. Lou has stopped drying glasses. Cash plays for 2 hours. He plays the Carter Family song, and then he plays Ring of Fire, and then he plays some Hank Williams, because Hank Williams belongs in a bar in West Texas the way the mountains belong on the horizon. And then he plays I Walk the Line, because Walt Reyes asked for it. And Cash does not refuse a request in a room this size. And then he plays a song he has been working on for a few weeks that nobody has heard yet, testing it in the way writers test unfinished things in small rooms where the stakes are low enough to be honest. Between songs he talks, the way he talks between songs on his regular show, but looser, more direct. The way a man talks when there are 4 people in the room rather than 4,000. He tells the story of the broken alternator. He asks Walt and Eddie about the Cibolo outfit, how many head they're running, how the grass has been. Walt tells him about a fence repair that took 3 weeks because the rock out near the south boundary was the kind of rock that defeats fence posts, and Cash listens with the genuine attention of a man who grew up in an agricultural family and understands what 3 weeks of fence work in West Texas rock actually means. At one point, Rosa Delgado says, "My husband loved your music." Cash says, "What was his name?" Rosa says, "Manuel. He died 2 years ago." Cash says, "I'm sorry." Rosa says, "He would have liked tonight. He would have said it was the best Wednesday we ever had at the Padres." Cash looks at her. He says, "What was his favorite song?" Rosa says, "Sunday Morning Coming Down." Cash plays Sunday Morning Coming Down. He plays it looking at Rosa Delgado, not performing for her, not making anything of it, just playing the song her late husband loved in a bar where she comes every Wednesday because Wednesday is when she used to come with him. When it ends, Rosa does not say anything. She looks at her drink for a moment. Then she looks at Cash and nods. A single small nod that carries the complete weight of what needs to be communicated without any of it needing to be put into words. Cash nods back. The tow truck driver arrives at the Padres at 1:30 in the morning. His name is Hector. He says the bus is at the garage on Highland. He says the part will be there from Alpine by 8 in the morning. He says by 9:30, 10 at the latest, they'll be back on the road. Cash says, "You want a beer, Hector?" Hector says, "I'm on the clock." Cash says, "I'll play you a song then." He plays Hector a song. Hector sits at the bar and drinks a Coca-Cola and listens to Johnny Cash play a song for him, specifically in the Padres bar on Highland Avenue in Marfa, Texas at 1:30 in the morning, which is something Hector will describe to his children and eventually his grandchildren as the best night of his professional career driving tow trucks in the Trans-Pecos. Cash plays until 2 o'clock, which is when Lou closes the bar. Lou closes it on time because Lou has been closing at 2 for 40 years, and a visit from Johnny Cash does not change the closing time, which is a decision Cash respects completely. He shakes hands with Walt and Eddie. He tells Eddie the song he liked best tonight, the unfinished one, was actually finished, he just hadn't known it until he played it in this room, which is true and which Eddie Reyes will remember for the rest of his life without fully understanding what it means, but with the clear sense that it was something worth remembering. He shakes hands with Hector. He says goodbye to Lou. He stops in front of Rosa Delgado. He says, "Manuel had good taste." Rosa says, "He did." She looks at him. She says, "Thank you for Sunday morning." Cash says, "He should have been here to hear it." Rosa says, "He was." She says it with the certainty of a woman who has decided what she believes and is not inviting a discussion. She was here every Wednesday for 31 years. You think tonight was the one Wednesday he missed? Cash looks at her for a moment. He says, "No, I don't think that at all." He picks up his guitar case and walks out of the Padres onto Highland Avenue. The desert night is cold and completely clear. The stars are still exactly what they were 3 hours ago, which is to say, they are everything. He walks to the garage to wait for morning. The show in El Paso happens on schedule. Lou Vasquez kept the barstool Cash sat on that night at the end of the bar, on the right side nearest the jukebox, and put a small piece of masking tape on the underside with the date and the name written in his handwriting. He did not make a sign. He did not frame a photograph. He put a piece of masking tape on the underside of a bar stool because that was the appropriate scale for what had happened, which was a man whose bus broke down walking into a bar and playing music because the music was available and the room needed it. The Padres closed in 1989 when Lou died. His daughter sold the building. The jukebox went with Lou's other things and was eventually sold at a state auction to a bar in Alpine that still has it. B7 is still Folsom Prison Blues. The bar stool is in a storage unit in Presidio County, in a box with Lou's other things that his daughter has not fully gone through yet. The masking tape still on the underside, the date and the name in Lou's careful handwriting, unchanged. Walt Reyes is still in Marfa. He is 73 years old. He runs a small operation of his own now, 120 acres on the east side of town. He wears the same style of hat he wore in the Padres on that October night because the sun in that part of Texas has not changed. He tells the story every few years when someone new comes to Marfa and someone who already knows the story tells the new person to ask Walt about the Wednesday night in '73. Walt tells it the same way every time, without embellishment, beginning with the broken alternator and ending with Rosa Delgado's last line, which he considers the best line of the entire night and which he has thought about across 50 years of thinking about it as the truest thing he heard anyone say in the Padres bar in all the years he went there. He was here every Wednesday for 31 years. You think tonight was the one Wednesday he missed? If this story reached you, leave a comment. Tell me where you are watching from. Tell me about a night that happened by accident that turned out to be exactly what it needed to be. Those nights are the ones worth keeping. Hit the like button if this is the kind of story you want more of and subscribe so you are here when the next one comes. We are not done yet.